What's going on, everybody? Offsetting Penalties podcast. We are back. Rankings week continues. Running backs today. I got 36 of them. I want to go through my different tiers for the running back fantasy rankings. If you've been here rocking with me all week, I appreciate you. If this is your first episode you're tuning in on because you feel particularly strong about the running back position in fantasy football, which many people do, then thank you anyways. I appreciate all the support. Subscribe to the YouTube if you're here. Follow on Spotify, Instagram, TikTok, at Offsetting Penalties. That's where you'll get the clips and the updates of the show and whatnot. Football season, I currently, if you see flashing lights and stuff, that's because I have the TV on right here. Hall of Fame game is on right now. Kind of football is back. I don't want to say football is completely back because it won't feel completely back until September 9th when the Patriots are taking on the Seahawks to open up the year. But we're getting closer and closer, and that especially means you need to be prepping for your fantasy football drafts. I'm here to help you with that. Go back, watch the quarterback and wide receiver episodes when you have the time to, if you haven't already. And let's get into the running backs. Of course, I feel like a trader. I'm going against Ghost today. I've got a C4, but this flavor, the cereal flavor, is unbelievable. I need an energy drink every time I do one of these pods. Okay, so running back position. Like I said, there's 36 of them. Like I've been saying all week, the way I rank my positions in fantasy and the way I highly encourage you to do as well is you can rank them 1 through whatever, but make sure you have them separated into tiers because the drop off from one player to the next might not be as significant as the drop off from that player to the next one, if you know what I'm saying. Meaning if you have running backs in this instance, because today's a running back episode, who you estimate are going to have about similar fantasy seasons, put them in the same tier. That can allow you to have more flexibility when drafting. So I'll get into that as the episode goes down. If you've listened to the first two, you're tired of me talking about tiers and whatnot. But let's start with tier 1. And there is a glaring surprise in my tier 1. Everyone knows Gibbs and Bijan are the tier 1 and 2. Christian McCaffrey I have in tier 1, Gibbs and Bijan are the tier 1 running backs. Everyone agrees with that. Those are the guys who have been going pick 1, pick 2 in one order or the next. I slightly have Gibbs over Bijan Robinson. I do think Christian McCaffrey belongs in this tier of running backs. I'll get into that in a second. I want to talk extensively about CMC. Let's talk Gibbs and Bijan first. The only question marks with these two guys was contracts, and both those have been resolved. Bijan got resolved earlier this week. The day I'm recording this, August 6th, Jahmyr Gibbs got his extension today. So you don't have to worry about holdouts leaking deep into into training camp, deep into the preseason. No. Both these guys are locked up long term. The reason I have Gibbs so slightly above Bijan, is it's just going to be a better offense and a more stable quarterback situation, right? You want your running back to be in offenses that are going to score a lot of touchdowns because that means that's more touchdowns for that running back to score themselves. Jahmyr Gibbs is in a Lions offense that is going to score more touchdowns than this Falcons offense is going to score. And a lot of that has to do with Jared Goff being the quarterback rather than Penix on a bad knee again or Tua Tagovailoa. So the only reason Gibbs, to me, is just ever so slightly above Bijan is because it's a better offense. He's going to have more chances to hit pay dirt and score you fantasy points. Now, the one thing that Bijan has that kind of works against Gibbs is both these guys are just phenomenal pass catchers. If Tua Tagovailoa is the quarterback for the Falcons, which we estimate he will be, no quarterback in the NFL the last few years has had a higher check down rate than Tua Tagovailoa. That's why Devon Achane has been so dominant in fantasy football the past few years. I'll talk about him shortly. So if you want to make that Bijan over Gibbs argument, what you point to is you've got a quarterback who is going to dump it off to him time and time and time again. Now, PPR leagues, that's especially important, right? And if you're in a PPR league and you want that over Jahmyr Gibbs, then sure. But Gibbs is also a phenomenal receiver. There's more mouths to feed in that offense, and it's a quarterback who Jared Goff will take his checkdowns, but not anywhere as much as Tua Tagovailoa will be. Penix, different story. We'll see how much Penix plays this year. That's kind of a TBD. Sounds like he's still going to be out for a little bit. So those are the number 1 and 2. Those are the guys who are going the top 2 in basically every fantasy draft this season. Now, if you feel really, really vindictive about Jamar Chase, Puka Nacua, even Jackson Smith and Jigba, then I'm very much okay with you taking one of those wide receivers over Gibbs and Bijan. The way I look at it is I think Gibbs and Bijan will have about as dominant fantasy seasons as those wide receivers in the first round, the Pukas, the Chases, the JSNs. And running backs just is just a more premium position, right? There's less great running backs than there are great wide receivers. So for that reason, I personally, if I was picking one, I would go Gibbs. And if I was picking two, I would pick whoever was there between Gibbs and Bijan based on whoever the number one guy's taking. So that's the way I look at it. Let's talk Christian McCaffrey now, because this is what I really want to talk about with this tier. I think most people are putting Christian McCaffrey a tier below Jahmyr Gibbs and Bijan Robinson for fantasy football purposes this year. And understandable. He's coming off of a year in which he touched the ball 400 times. Running backs historically, coming off of 400 plus touch seasons, fall off drastically in fantasy football. We saw that with Christian McCaffrey 2 seasons ago when he came off that year with a bunch of touches and was hurt most of the year with tendonitis. We saw that last year with Saquon Barkley. After he came off his dominant season, Saquon Barkley had a little bit of a slower season last year. So I can understand the timidness by people as to not wanting Christian McCaffrey, considering his injury history, considering how much he touched the ball last season. But my question to you is this. If you're in the first round, if you're picking in the first half of the first round, are you trying to win your fantasy league, or are you trying to make it a little more of an uphill climb? Are you trying to win your fantasy league, or are you trying to play it safe? That's a better way to put it. Because me personally, when I'm drafting, I'm trying to win my fantasy league. And what Christian McCaffrey will do is if he is healthy and he plays, forget a full 17 games, if the dude plays 14 to 15 games, right, and he's healthy, he will win you your fantasy championship. And he will be the RB1 in fantasy. It's really fun talking about how good Gibbs and Bijan will be. But Christian McCaffrey, if he is healthy, will have a better season than both those guys. Because McCaffrey is in arguably a better offense than both those guys. He will touch the ball as much, if not more, than both those guys. And Christian McCaffrey has more of a receiving upside than both those guys, who are both phenomenal receivers in their own right. So I understand the timidness for Christian McCaffrey. And me personally, the injury history plus how much he touched the ball last year, to me, puts him below Gibbs and Bijan. But for the people out there who are kind of like really want a first round running back and you're picking pick 3, pick 4, pick 5, and you're staring down Puka Nacua or JSN, if you take Christian McCaffrey and your league mates clown you, laugh in their faces. Because those league mates can have their safe first round picks and hey, that might come and bite you back in the butt. But Christian McCaffrey, when he is healthy, wins you your fantasy league. Point blank and simple. He will win you your fantasy league. He will be one of the most dominant players in fantasy football. The dude is a freak. The dude is just a fantasy machine. So if you want to draft scared, stay away from Christian McCaffrey. But if you're there, Gibbs and Bijan are off the board. To me, I have Christian McCaffrey as the 4th overall player in fantasy. That's the way I look at it. I would take Gibbs, Bijan, and I would take Jamar Chase over Christian McCaffrey. If I'm picking 4, 5, or 6, or anywhere past that, and Christian McCaffrey's on my board, I'm drafting him because I don't want to play scared in fantasy football. It might come bite you in the butt. It might whatever. But I'm not playing for 4th place. I'm not playing for 3rd place. I'm playing to get in the championship and give myself a chance to win my fantasy league. That's why I would take Christian McCaffrey. That is my pitch to the people who are scared. I can understand why you're scared. But are you playing for 4th place or are you playing for a shot at winning a belt? That's all I have to say about it. Don't need to get into the stats or nothing with these 3 guys. They're all going to be dominators. The only one with question marks is Christian McCaffrey because of the injuries. But I say don't draft scared. Draft to win championships, and if it doesn't happen, then it doesn't happen. So tier 2, this is where a lot of people are putting Christian McCaffrey. I have one guy here. It's Jonathan Taylor. I really do think there is a significant drop-off from Christian McCaffrey to Jonathan Taylor, but I do believe tier 3, which I will talk about extensively because there's 8 guys in there, I think Jonathan Taylor is a notch above those guys. What scares me a little bit about Jonathan Taylor is last year the schedule was amazing for him, and last year when Daniel Jones was in the lineup balling out, it was amazing for him. When Jones started, not after Jones torn Achilles, but people forget that Daniel Jones was dealing with some injuries. He was playing hobbled prior to the torn Achilles, right? When he was playing hurt and hobbled, that hurt the Colts offense tremendously, and that hurt Jonathan Taylor's fantasy value tremendously. Jonathan Taylor looked like he was going to run away with fantasy MVP awards. And then that last stretch of the season, the final 6 weeks or so, it really started to drop off. And I think, like I was just talking about with Bijan, Gibbs, and McCaffrey, I think that was a product of his offense. I don't think that was a Jonathan Taylor issue. But when your offense is worse, that usually means the running back fantasy production is worse. and the Colts were seeing less red zone trips. Jonathan Taylor had more attention on him because they were loading the boxes, because Riley Leonard and Phillip Rivers really weren't demanding the respect down the field that Daniel Jones did. So it became kind of disappointing for Jonathan Taylor owners who were like coming in hot. They were just riding high coming into the postseason, or coming into that final stretch of fantasy seasons, and then Jonathan Taylor like cooled off tremendously. I don't think that was a Taylor issue. Now, Taylor is a little bit older. He did touch the ball an enormous amount last year. Kind of a similar concern with Christian McCaffrey. Jonathan Taylor does have a little bit of an injury history. And the other thing with Jonathan Taylor is, okay, we can explain the lack of production at the end of last year because the offense was hurt. Who's to say the offense is going to be any better than it was down the stretch last year? Because Daniel Jones is back, but he's coming off of a torn Achilles. And that is an enormously difficult recovery for players. Is Daniel Jones going to be hobbled enough to where it hurts the Colts offense, and to where the Colts offense isn't really playing up to its potential, thus not giving Jonathan Taylor the necessary opportunities to produce? Jonathan Taylor is still a first-round pick. I do believe Daniel Jones will be okay this year. I really do believe that. But you have to kind of make those decisions for yourself. Is Jonathan Taylor going to be this alpha running back one that he looked like he was going to be last year? Or is he going to be what he was the end of last year, which is a running back that's hurting because of a product of the offense he plays in? I think it's going to be somewhere in between. If you were leaning that he's going to be that running back he was the beginning of last year, he's the number one overall pick in fantasy, like he has been in years past. If you believe that Colts offense is going to be as bad as it was down the stretch, even with Daniel Jones back, then he's probably deserving of going in the second, third round. Me, the way I look at it, I don't think it'll be as good as it was at times for Indy last year, but I also don't think it'll be as bad as it was at the end of last year, because Jones is back. Despite being on an Achilles, he is back. The offense is better because of it. I put Taylor as my tier 2 running back. I have zero issues taking him mid-first round. If he's there at the end of the first round, you love it. If he's there in the second round, you press draft as quick as possible before your app glitches out and you're not able to do so. So that's JT in tier 3. Let me get a sip of this energy drink. Not Ghost. I feel like such a traitor. All right. I said this, and I'm probably going to spend damn near half the episode talking about tier 3. So James Cook, Ashton Jeanty, Omarion Hampton, Chase Brown, Devon Achane, Saquon Barkley, Kenneth Walker, and Derrick Henry. That is tier 3 to me. If this is a unique year to me, because never have I seen the running back position quite so top heavy. And not just top heavy, but the top is large, right? I've already talked about 4 running backs. This is another 8, right? If you do fantasy math, that means if you're in 12-man leagues, that means 1 great running back per roster, because I think any one of these guys you could draft to be the RB1 on your roster. Now, of course, a lot of these guys, however, should be supplemented by another player in the first round or another high draft pick, right? That's why these guys are going late first round to second to maybe even sneaking into the third round. So I want to go down the line now. I will say this. Number 1, it is August 6th when I'm recording this. These rankings shift every day. I made this graphic yesterday, and today I shifted Chase Brown and Omarion Hampton. So Chase Brown currently right now is above Hampton. There will come a time in which Brown will probably go below Hampton again. There might be a time in which Brown goes above Jeanty, right? I love all of these guys in this tier, but they do all have slight question marks, more so than those top 4 guys. This is why they're drafted here. So let me go down the line. These guys are all about similar fantasy production, but don't just see my graphic and think this is how I have them ranked. This is how you should have them ranked. It's shuffling every day. Do your little bit of prep, go with your gut, and take of this tier of guys who you feel most comfortable drafting. So at the top, James Cook. James Cook is a very, very highly touted fantasy prospect this year. He's coming off of a historic year with Buffalo. He scored just a tremendous amount of touchdowns, and he was in a really good Bills offense that has gotten better this offseason, right? There's continuity because Joe Brady is not just the OC, he's still the head coach, so it's the same offensive system. They added a wide receiver in DJ Moore that will help the offense, thus help James Cook in his value. The issue with James Cook was James Cook isn't really built like a workhorse back, and he was a workhorse back for this Bills team last year. Joe Brady has talked about wanting to kind of lower the touches, right? Just because he touched the ball so much last year, kind of get some of the other Bills running backs like Ray Davis involved. So that is the one nuance, is he's probably just not going to have the volume he did last year. But the Bills' run game is so good, the Bills' offense is so good that you still feel comfortable taking him late first, early second round. Ashton Jeanty. Ashton Jeanty is a player I keep going back and forth with. When I first did my rankings, he probably would have been at the bottom of this tier. I love Clint Kubiak's system. I think this West Coast offense, this zone run scheme, is perfect for a back like Jeanty. He came into camp, lost some weight. I really do think Genty's poised for a breakout year. Every time in recent history we've seen a running back go in the top 10 picks or so, rookie year might be a little up and down, might be disappointing, but they always seem to break out in year two. Bijan Robinson broke out in year two. Jahmyr Gibbs broke out in year two. I do believe Ashton Jeanty will break out in year two as well. I think this Clint Kubiak zone run system is tailor-made for him. It sounds like he's in much better shape coming into camp. He's already gotten past those kind of rookie bumps that a lot of NFL players deal with, especially when you're at a premier position that's being relied on to be a workhorse for this team. The other thing, too, is the Vegas offense just doesn't have a ton of other people to go with. Obviously, Bowers is a complete dominator at the tight end position. The wide receiver room's a little weak. The rest of the backfield, there's not many options. So you project Genty's going to touch the ball a whole lot. I know Clint Kubiak kind of did the timeshare thing in Seattle with Kenneth Walker and Zach Charbonnet. Okay, Zach Charbonnet's a solid back. I don't think there's another solid back on this roster. I think Ashton Jeanty we'll see 70 to 80% of the snaps. I really like Jeanty this year. Talking about second-year breakouts, Omarion Hampton's another one. Hampton was amazing last year when he was the workhorse. When it was Gus Edwards, right? When there were other backs involved in LA last year, Omarion Hampton was like, okay, but a lot of his production was coming off of PPR kind of dump off like garbage time. Not garbage time, but just dump off like a point for the catch and then another like couple half points for 4 yards, 5 yards, whatever it was. Like he wasn't really breaking big gains off these dump offs. Now he is in the zone run system with Mike McDaniel. If you can't tell, I love this system. The zone run system is not built for all running backs in the NFL, but so many of them could thrive if they were in systems like that. That's why we've seen that's why we've seen Christian McCaffrey have the seasons that he's had in San Francisco. That's why we've seen Todd Gurley have the seasons he did in LA. So many of the backs, Josh Jacobs in Green Bay, so many of the backs who get to play in this Shanahan, McVay type West Coast zone run offense thrive. Omarion Hampton's in it. Devon Achane, who I'll talk about shortly, thrived in this system with Mike McDaniel. Mike McDaniel always finds a way to get the ball in his playmakers' hands in creative ways too, so it's not stale. You're not just giving it to Hampton in between the tackles every play. I really like it. The two like nuances with Jeanty and Hampton, right, is they're both like second-year breakouts, but you're counting on the breakout, right? Whereas a lot of the other guys in this tier and that I've already talked about, we've already seen the breakout. We've already seen what they're capable of, so there's no like if they can do it. Jeanty and Hampton, we haven't seen them do it at the pro level for prolonged periods of time. So the question mark with these two guys is, are they able to break out? Because it's easier said than done to just say, oh, second year breakout, it's going to happen. I think all the signs are pointing to it. That's why I have these guys ranked so highly. But obviously that is a concern. And that brings me to Chase Brown, who we've seen have his breakout. And Chase Brown is the safest player of this tier. If you take Chase Brown end of the first round, I have zero issue with it. Personally, I'm picking in pick 10 in my home fantasy league, and I would be lying to my viewers right now, which I'm sure includes a couple of my league mates, if I said Chase Brown wasn't someone I was considering. Like Chase Brown, I would very heavily consider at the end of the first round, just because if you're not picking at the top of the first round, I want guaranteed production. And whereas James Cook gave great production last year, I think there will be a little bit of a drop off in his volume this year. Jeanty and Hampton, who I believe are amazing players, I've never seen them have that production before for a full fantasy season or full stretches of a fantasy season. Chase Brown, we've seen it. When Joe Burrow was the quarterback, Chase Brown averages over 19 fantasy points a game. Chase Brown is potentially the safest pick in fantasy football that isn't coming at the beginning of the first round. So if you're picking late first round, early second round, and Chase Brown's on the board, and you just want a running back that you know is going to get you 15 plus points week in and week out. With Burrow, he's never averaged less than 19 points a game. Chase Brown is your guy. So that is why this tier for me is just a nightmare trying to rank them, but also such a gold mine for people picking late first round, early second round, mid second round. Because you've got this stretch of running backs who all are in very, very different situations, but give you little different skill sets, different like potential, different ceilings, different floors, where you can really be calculated about how you draft in fantasy. James Cook, you are counting on to be just a touchdown machine like he was last year. Genty and Hampton, you're counting on to be a full breakout. So the ceiling's higher than a lot of the guys in this tier, but the floor is also a lot lower. It's a lot more volatile. Chase Brown is a high floor guy. Maybe he's not going to be the RB3 in fantasy. It would be kind of far-fetched for him to be a top 3 running back in fantasy. Could he be a top 6 running back in fantasy? Absolutely, and I'd say he's got a better chance at that than anyone else on the screen right now. So that's the beauty of this tier of running backs. Devon Achane, this one is just messing with my head, dude. Trying to evaluate Devon Achane this year is messing with my head. I had him, when I first put together my rankings, so unbelievably low, and it hurt my heart. Because for all my friends out there and all the people out there that know me, I'm a 49ers fan. My 2 favorite non-49er players in the league are Amon-Ra St. Brown and Devon Achane. And Achane is, to me, talent level on the same level as Bijan and Gibbs. He's just been in much worse offenses and much worse situations, right? But if you put Bijan Robinson, Jahmyr Gibbs, and Devon Achane in the same offensive situation, I think Achane produces just as much as those 2 guys, because I think he's just as talented, if not more talented, than those 2 guys. So to me, it hurts my heart that I'm taking some of these guys over Devon Achane, but you got to look at the offensive situation. They changed. Mike McDaniel's gone. And what made Devon Achane so valuable in fantasy last year and the year before was Mike McDaniel was able to get the ball in this guy's hands in such innovative ways, use his skill set as a receiver, which is arguably more talented than his skill set as a runner, right? Tua Tagovailoa was his quarterback. Like I mentioned when I talked about Bijan Robinson, Tua Tagovailoa checks the ball down more than any other quarterback in the National Football League. That fed right into Devon Achane's hands for fantasy value, especially in PPR leagues. Mike McDaniel's gone, so those guaranteed innovative touches aren't guaranteed to be there. Tua Tagovailoa's gone. In comes Malik Willis, who might check the ball down to Achane, but will not as much as Tua, because 1, Tua just checks the ball down a whole lot, but also number 2, because Malik Willis is a scrambler. And when in doubt, when the play looks like it's breaking down, he is more likely to take off and use his legs than he is to dump it off to Devon Achane. So based on those evaluations, I originally had Achane very low in my rankings. But then I came back to it. This dude, talent-wise, is one of the most talented players in the NFL. I'm willing to say that. Not just running backs, not just skill players. This guy is one of the most talented athletes and NFL players, period. So if you believe in the talent, you take this guy. You could take this guy over Cook. You could take this guy over Genty, over Hampton, over Chase Brown, over Barkley, Walker, Henry, because he is that talented. And what you bet on is that he will overcome a pretty bad offensive situation because Miami has no wide receivers, really no tight ends. The quarterback situation, Malik Willis, you think will be okay, but you don't know for sure. So if you take Devon Achane, it is a bet on the player Devon Achane and the talent and the fact that because there's no one else in the offense, he's probably going to run the ball 25, 30 times a game. The reason I have him below some of the other guys in this tier is just the simple fact that I believe he'll touch the ball a bunch. I believe it'll be more on the ground, less through the air. And obviously through the air is so much more valuable for fantasy football, especially if you play in PPR leagues. So for that reason, I have him below the likes of Chase Brown, Genty, Hampton, and whatnot. But I'm slowly inching him up the rankings. There's a chance he continues to inch up as we get closer to fantasy drafts throughout August, just because I just think he's such a good player. I think on this tier, he is the most talented player, the best running back. Does that make you the best fantasy running back, though? No, you have to take things into another account. That's where I sit with Devon Achane. Unbelievable talent, unbelievable player. You worry about the offensive situation. If you take him, you're betting on the talent over the situation. Saquon Barkley, weird. Last year was not good for him. Like I talked about with McCaffrey, he dealt with the 400 plus touch season and the ramifications of that the next year. But I also don't think it was all his fault, right? Like Saquon didn't look incredible last year by any means. I understand that. But what I mean by it wasn't all his fault is the fact that the Eagles' yards before contact and Saquon Barkley's yards before contact dropped off tremendously from 2024 to 2025. So while I'm worried about Barkley's age and he's just got too much wear, that was also a bad offensive line situation last year that I think will improve. Sean Mannion's the offensive coordinator now. How many times am I going to say that this broadcast? West Coast offense, zone run offense. The zone run for Saquon Barkley. Hold on, I'm gonna pause this Hall of Fame game. This light is killing me right now from the. Okay, so Saquon Barkley is now going to be in that West Coast zone run offense, and his skill set is built beautifully for it, just like I talked about with Genty and Hampton. So you would think that the yards before contact will improve, and that'll give Saquon the ability to do more of what he does best, which is breaking off the long rushing touchdowns. So I do think Saquon Barkley has a bounce back year this year. I worry a little bit, one, about the ceiling just because of the age, and two, because the touchdowns will be there, but you just like there's always that built-in fear that if the Eagles get to the one, you know it's not going to be Barkley scoring the touchdowns, you know it's going to be Jalen Hurts. So that is why I have him where he is in this tier. But if you take him late first round, second round, I have zero issues with it. Kenneth Walker, highly talked about player this year. I talked about him extensively in the past, a couple episodes ago. Kenneth Walker is such a great player, but my fear with him, and I won't go too much into this, go watch my training camp takeaways video if you want the full Kenneth Walker thing. But my concern with Kenneth Walker is we've never truly seen K9 be the workhorse for a full fantasy season, right? We've seen shades of it when Charbonnet goes down, but as long as Kenneth Walker's been in Seattle, it's always been a season in which he splits a lot of the snaps with Zach Charbonnet, or Kenneth Walker is getting banged up. He's missed games in basically every season of his career except for last year. Last year was his healthiest year. So I do worry a little bit with the workload that injury will become an issue. And I also worry about maybe a later season drop-off with him just not being used to being a workhorse for as long as he has been, because frankly, that's why Kansas City signed him, was to be a workhorse for this offense. You love that for fantasy purposes, but you worry a little bit, can the player do it? If you draft Kenneth Walker, you are betting on the player being able to do it. If you don't draft Kenneth Walker, I don't have an issue with it. Personally, I'd take Kenneth Walker if the pick is right, the value is right, but all these other guys on this, to me, Kenneth Walker feels very solidified where he is in this tier for me personally. Now, the difference between him and Cook and Genty and Hampton and Chase Brown is not very large at all. That's the point of doing these tiers. But I'm just a little more out on him than I am the rest of these guys in this area of the drafts, just because I haven't seen it. And with Kenneth Walker, I want to be able to see it. So Derrick Henry's the final one. The only reason Henry's at the end is the built-in concern that we've had for the last, it feels like 10 seasons now, is when is the age going to catch up to Henry? Because he just seems ageless at this point. It might this year, but to me, we're yet to see it happen. And I'm not going to draft with the fear that it's going to happen if Henry is just such a beast and he takes care of his body. They're going to be in the Ben Johnson style offense this year with Declan Doyle being the OC in Baltimore. I believe Henry is poised for a great year. The only reason he's at the bottom of this tier is, one, the age concerns. That doesn't mean don't draft him. That just means I prefer the other guys of this tier more than him. And number two, he lacks the receiving upside that really the rest of these guys on this tier have and possess. So that's the only reason for Derrick Henry being where he is. Before I move on, because I just talked about this tier for, it feels like 20 minutes, this group of running backs right here, I believe will win a lot of people drafts. I'm not saying all 8 of these guys are going to be hits, right? To me, I look at every single one of these guys, and it's hard for me to envision any one of these guys having a big disappointment of a fantasy season. Now, of course, they have high ADP, so they need to really put together great seasons to deliver. but I just have a hard time envisioning any of these guys like massively letting down their fantasy owners. Now, you might be disappointed, you might be inconsistent with a couple of these guys, but I think all these guys have tremendous value, and I really do think the move this year might be second round running back, because I think all these guys are going late first, somewhere in the second round, maybe sneaking into the third. And I really feel like you'll see there is somewhat of a drop off the rest of the way for running backs. And I just feel like whether you double up and you go running back round one, round two, or you just take one of these guys round one or round two, if I'm drafting in fantasy and I don't get one of those top 4 running backs, the Bijan, Gibbs, CMC, Taylor, I want at least one of these guys so that I'm not completely thin at the running back position, unless you punt RB position all the way and you end up getting tremendous value at the wide receiver position or tight end position in the first 2 rounds. So that's where I stand on the tier 3 running backs. Tier 4, and I won't talk as extensively the rest of the way. Josh Jacobs. Josh Jacobs, I think in years past would be in tier 3. He slowed down a little bit at the end of last year. I think part of that is an age thing with this guy. He's got a lot of wear and tear on him because he's always been a workhorse. The other thing is there is some off-season stuff, some pretty like serious charges from the offseason, which include like strangulation and domestic violence and whatnot. Now, it sounds like it got dismissed for the most part, but the NFL still has to do their investigation into it. So that makes you a little timid with Josh Jacobs. But if he's healthy, he's going to be the workhorse. And what Josh Jacobs does so well is he scores touchdowns. Green Bay just knows get to the red zone. This is where this guy is at his best. Josh Jacobs is a very, very solid RB2 in fantasy football this year to me. Or if you have really good wide receivers, you could slot him in as your RB1, no problem. Cam Skattebo, we saw unbelievable production out of Scat last year prior to the brutal injury. So obviously that's baked in a little bit, is the concern of, can he get back to what he was doing before the pretty gruesome knee injury? He's at camp, he's practicing, he's looking good. The reason I think he's a valuable fantasy asset is he's a 3-down back. He catches the ball, he runs the ball. He's built like your stereotypical goal line back. So he'll be great, but you worry a little bit, one, about the offense. How much are they going to be scoring? If the offense isn't great, that means Cam Skattebo might not be that great. But I think Skattebo is going to be amazing nonetheless. Breece Hall, bad offense. I worry a little bit about Geno Smith, who's not historically a check down guy to the running back. But Breece Hall is just so talented. The Jets gave him money. They put their trust in Breece Hall to be their running back of the future. I do anticipate the offense will be better than it was last year, just with them adding some wide receiver weapons through the draft. I think he'll have a better year. You obviously worry about the ceiling just because the Jets offense won't be good, but he's still such a talented back that you take him. Kyren Williams, the concern with this guy is Blake Corum. The first half of last year, Kyren Williams was amazing. The second half of last year, McVay really started to kind of like borderline go 50-50 timeshare between Kyren Williams and Blake Corum. I think Kyren Williams is the better back than Blake Corum, so I don't think that will happen this fantasy season, but that's a concern because McVay has historically always been a workhorse coach. He finds his running back, he gives them 80 to 90% of the snaps and touches. Now that we saw him get away from that last year, that signals maybe a change in philosophy from McVay. I still think you take Kyren and you just worry about the Blake Corum involvement, but here's the cool thing about Kyren. If you have Kyren and Blake Corum gets hurt, you have a top 10 running back in fantasy football and he will dominate. Jeremiah Love. I have this guy just way, way below ADP. Right now on Sleeper, he is and I've got it right here, he's the RB11. Not even close to where I have him. Not even close. I have him much below that. I want to start by saying this. Jeremiah Love is unbelievable. Jeremiah Love is one of my favorite running back prospects in a very long time. For people saying there's no business for a running back going 3rd overall or wherever he went, yes, there is. Because if there's a running back this good, you take him just for the player and the talent alone. However, Tyler Allgeier's there. What was the issue with Bijan Robinson for a while? Bijan was always getting spelled by Tyler Allgeier. James Conner is still there. Now, James Conner is rehabbing from an injury and whatnot, but he's still under contract with this team. If James Conner comes back and you've got Algier, how is Love going to be able to touch the ball enough to justify picking him in the first 2 or 3 rounds? I don't think so. And that's what really scares me about this guy, is he's an unworldly talent. But there's mouths to feed in that backfield. We know how coaches are typically, where they love giving their vets as much touches as their talented young players, especially when it comes to the running back position. In this Cardinals offense, I don't project to be good enough. Like, it's one thing if this Cardinals offense was going to be a top 10 offense in the league. Then you'd be okay with Love, even with the timeshare with the other running backs, with Algier and James Conner, just because if they're scoring enough, Jeremiah Love will get his, and he's a talented enough player. I don't think they will. So for that reason, I have him at this tier, which breaks my heart, and he's definitely a breakout candidate next year. And who knows, he proves me wrong. I will not be surprised just because he's so damn good. But the situation is working against him. Javonte Williams is the most boring pick in fantasy football, but he's the safest pick. He's going to be the Dallas workhorse. He's going to see 80% of the snaps. He's going to catch the ball a whole lot. Now, is he going to get yards off those catches? No, he's going to just be Dak's outlet when he has nowhere else to go. 4-yard gains all day through the air. And he's going to be their goal line back. He's not going to be a high ceiling player. He's not going to be a top 5 running back in fantasy. But as long as he's healthy, you bet your ass he's going to be a top 24 running back in fantasy. And I would even be willing to say he'll be a top 16 running back. So Javonte Williams is the most boring pick in fantasy, but one of the safest picks in fantasy. Definitely the type of pick you take in the 3rd or 4th round if your first 2 picks really have some risk involved. That's what I think people should do more in fantasy, is if you take some really risky, volatile picks early, give yourself safer players late. And Javonte Williams is the safe player, kind of just a downgraded version of Josh Jacobs, in my opinion. Both those guys are incredibly safe. So I'm losing my voice here, dude. Let me get a sip of the energy drink. Okay, tier 5. So now all these guys, this rounds out the top 24. So Bashal Tutin, very much talked about. Travis Etienne, Etienne, I'll talk about him shortly. Bashal Tutin seems like he might be the guy. Now, they signed Chris Rodriguez, who C-Rod was, Chris Rodriguez was very productive in Washington last year. They went out and signed him, but Chris Rodriguez has been out of training camp a little bit. Tutin is already familiar with the system. He really showed shades of greatness last year. He's a sneaky, sneaky good receiver out of the backfield. You do worry, because Trevor Lawrence is such a weapon on the goal line, if Bashal Tutin can score the touchdowns when in the red area. You also worry a little bit about Chris Rodriguez, the fact that they brought him in, they paid him. But I think Tutin's a very talented player. I think he's a value that if you do punt the running back position a little bit, and you get him as your RB2, you feel pretty good about it. So I like Tutin this year in fantasy. Bucky Irvin, this one is devastating too, because unbelievably talented player, so fun to watch. He plays the game like a bowling ball, though, and his body isn't built for it. He's just consistently banged up. And last year he started the year on fire, and he entered the year looking like he was going to be the Tampa Bay workhorse. And then he gets hurt. He's dealing with injuries. This year they bring in Kenny Gainwell. Kenny Gainwell is a guy who saw touches in Philly. He saw many touches in Pittsburgh. They gave him money, so he'll see touches in Tampa. That kind of caps Bucky Irving's upside, especially because Kenny Gainwell is such a good receiver. But Bucky Irving's very talented, so no problem taking him. But you worry about the injuries. You worry about the lack of receiving upside if Gainwell is their receiving back. DeAndre Swift, you've got Kyle Monangai there, but I do believe Swift is still the guy. He proved that last year. He's going to be what you think is going to be the starting running back in a good offense that does run the ball a lot. Does he have crazy upside? No, because of Monangai's presence, but I still think he'll be valuable. David Montgomery, the former Bear, I think the change of scenery is good for him because now he gets to be a 3-down workhorse for Houston. And he's built to be a 3-down workhorse, even though he's been part of the 1-2 punch with Gibbs in years past. David Montgomery is built to be that workhorse for the Houston Texans. You worry because the offense isn't great. So how many times is he going to see the red area with chances to score touchdowns? Who knows? But, the defense is going to keep him in a lot of games, meaning that they're going to run the ball a lot. Like philosophically, they're going to run the ball a lot, especially with the struggle CJ Stroud has had in the past couple of years. So David Montgomery is a very safe 3-down back, and he goes as far as the Houston Texans offense goes, the way I look at it. Quinshon Judkins and TreVeyon Henderson, I want to loop both these guys in because both these guys were teammates in college, Ohio State teammates, and both these guys were obviously rookies last year. They're coming into their second years. Both guys had breakouts down the stretch last year. They both showed shades of greatness. They both have two different things working against them. TreVeyon Henderson, I'll start with him because it's easy. It's Ramondre Stevenson. I know it's frustrating for Henderson owners to constantly see Ramondre Stevenson on the field. But at this point, and it got to that point last year, where if you see Ramondre and TreVeyon Henderson, and they're both active on game day, it can be disappointing seeing Ramondre Stevenson getting a bunch of snaps and Henderson being off the field. But at this point, you have to expect it. You have to, right? It was so fatiguing last year with TreVeyon Henderson owners, and we're deep into the fantasy season, and they're screaming about Ramondre being on the field. And I could understand at the beginning of the year, but we got to late year, and it became very clear that it was like, guys, we know Stevenson is very highly valued by that coaching staff and by that offense. And he does a lot of the dirty work that TreVeyon Henderson, frankly, doesn't do. So that is the cap with Henderson. But he's an enormously explosive player. He's going to rip big plays. He's going to be very volatile. The thing with him, and you don't want to root for injuries, if Ramondre goes down, TreVeyon Henderson is top 6 RB in fantasy. But if Ramondre's in, you do worry about the upside, especially he won't be getting the goal line touches. So that's him. Quinshon Judkins, he's coming off of a pretty serious injury. That's part of it. You worry about the offense, right? You just worry this Browns offense, you've got Shedeur or Deshaun Watson at quarterback. Is this offense going to see enough opportunities to score for Quinshon Judkins to, provide for his fantasy owners? And also Dylan Sampson is there, who is a very good receiving back. So that takes away some of the receiving upside from Quinshon Judkins, who isn't a enormously talented receiving back in his own right. So that is the concern with Judkins. Judkins and Henderson are both talented players. They just have situations, whether it's because of running mates in the backfield or the offense they play in, that are working against them. Tier 6, Jadarian Price. This guy is, to me, just unbelievably exciting. I think he's going to be such a stud at some point. He was Jeremiah Love's kind of backup. You'd really call him a running mate because he was so talented, but he was, alongside Jeremiah Love at Notre Dame. Jadarian Price is an unbelievable player right now because Charbonnet's hurt. There's not really any other bodies in the Seahawks backfield. The rumors out of camp is that this guy's a 3-down back. But it is very, very, very rare for a rookie to be a 3-down back off rip in the NFL. There's going to be some growing pains at first. And my concern is those growing pains, whether that's in pass protection or whatnot. My concerns with Jadarian Price is that those growing pains, by the time he's able to get past them, Zach Charbonnet is going to be back fully integrated in the offense, and we're going to see a similar timeshare to what we saw with Zach Charbonnet and Kenneth Walker in years past. That's the concern. If Price is a 3-down workhorse the whole year, this guy has no business being in Tier 6. He should be in Tier 3 or 4. But we don't know if that's going to be the case or not. Travis Etienne Jr. So this is what I want to explain here. This offseason, he came out when he got signed by the Saints, and in his introductory press conference, he said, now that I'm signed, I want to make it clear. The pronunciation of my name is Etienne, not Etienne. That's confusing for us podcast people, especially on a running back podcast, when I was talking not long ago about Devon Etienne. So for the sake of the podcast and to avoid confusion, I'm going to call him Etienne. But just know that if you see people referring to him as Etienne, that is why. This guy is going a lot higher in drafts than I think he should be going. I get it. The Saints went out, gave him good money. Alvin Kamara is there, people. Alvin Kamara, I know he's older. He's not nearly as talented as he is, but Alvin Kamara is there. They kept Alvin Kamara in the building. If you think Alvin Kamara, even at this stage of his career, is not going to see the field, you're smoking crack. Alvin Kamara is a Saints legend. He is very trusted by that coaching staff. The reports out of camp is that he's the 3rd-down back and Etienne is the 1st and 2nd-down back. I'm sorry. I think the Saints offense will be great, but I don't want a timeshare running back who's not going to be a receiving back early in the 3rd, 4th, 5th round. I'm out on that. This is where I have him. if we get guarantees that he'll kind of get like, maybe it'll be like 65-35 ETN Kamara, I'll move him up in my rankings. But as of August 6th right now, I'm out on ETN where he's being drafted. Chuba Hubbard's a disappointing one because Dave Canales' offenses feed their workhorse backs, and he's going to be the workhorse back right now. But unfortunately, last year when he was the workhorse back, he was very inefficient and very bad, and not the Chuba Hubbard that I believed in, that I thought was really good in years prior. So that is the issue with Chuba Hubbard, is that he will probably start as the workhorse, but based on the metrics and what we saw out of him last year, he was not a very good workhorse. And what will happen is if he struggles at the end of the year, and Jonathan Brooks, who I know is coming off of so many injuries, but was such a highly touted prospect and so unbelievably talented, if Jonathan Brooks comes out and starts balling out and looks really good, Brooks is the workhorse, and there goes Hubbard to the bench. So that is the concern with Chuba Hubbard. Jaylen Warren, I think, will be Pittsburgh's third down back, which is very valuable in a Mike McCarthy offense, and also with Aaron Rodgers, who checks the ball down a lot. The only reason his value is capped is because of Rico Dowdle being kind of the main back there. And then Ramondre Stevenson, who is a great player in his own right, despite what the media wants to tell you. He's capped just because you've got Travion Henderson there. Now we're getting to the part of the RB rankings where we're looking at guys who are kind of in timeshares, and that's the issue. Final tier, tier 7. Kenny Gainwell, I talked about him earlier. Him and Bucky Irving, I think, are going to split snaps. Now, there's rumors that they're going to see the field a lot with each other and whatnot. Okay, regardless, it is a timeshare in Tampa Bay, but I think it's a timeshare that you can find value in both guys. Bucky Irving's clearly the more talented. He'll see the more touches you would imagine, but Kenny Gainwell is super reliable. He looked really good in Pittsburgh the last couple of years, and he's a receiving back. And as we know, receiving is king for running backs in fantasy football. Tony Pollard, who else in like Tennessee? Like, you just predict he's going to be the Tennessee lead back. How good is he going to be? To be seen. J.K. Dobbins, again, he's going to be splitting with R.J. Harvey, but he's going to be the early down back who gets the short yardage and the red zone touches. So even though R.J. Harvey might look like the better player, like eye test wise, based on what the coaching staff believes in and based on what we've seen, J.K. Dobbins will be the running back who sees the field more. Bill Crosby-Merritt, or Ja'Cory Crosby-Merritt, will see the field, and you would imagine will be the lead back in that Washington backfield. But they signed Rachaad White, who's a good receiving back, and I don't know. It's just a little, I don't know what to really think of that backfield, but if I had to take a shot on one, I'd take a shot on Crosby-Merritt. Mononga, I talked about earlier, him and Swift both could go nuclear if one or the other gets hurt. I project Swift to be the top back there, but Mononga is very talented in his own right, despite being a 7th rounder last year. Rico Dowdle, I was just talking about him with Jaylen Warren. He'll be the early down back you'd imagine for Pittsburgh. They went out and got him, but his production is capped because he's not really a receiver. He's splitting the snaps. And then Jordan Mason, right below him, I'd have Aaron Jones. That's kind of going to be a timeshare backfield, and who knows between those two who will be the lead back. My gut tells me Jordan Mason. I believe in the talent more at this stage of his career than I do an Aaron Jones who's dealt with hamstring, soft tissue injuries and whatnot. So, I am losing my voice, people. Wow. Okay, fantasy running back rankings done. They'll be timestamped below, so if you ever need to go back and look at these rankings, or if you want to go back and look at them now, screenshot them, whatnot, these will get posted to Instagram in the coming weeks as we get closer to drafts. I just want to get these long-form podcasts out as soon as possible so it can help people prepare for their drafts. The point of these rankings isn't for you to just copy my rankings. It's for you to go out and make your own rankings. And if you don't have the time to, you can copy mine, and there's no issue with that, and I'm flattered. But the point of this is for you to kind of see how to evaluate your own rankings, and I can kind of give insight. And like I talked about with this tier 3, which I talked about for so long, right? Like, all these guys have different things that they bring to the table, and based on what you prioritize in fantasy football, you could rearrange their spots like I am doing every day. So the tier is such a nightmare, dude. So regardless, that's it. I appreciate everyone being here. Tight end rankings are coming out on Sunday. That will conclude rankings week. Next week, UFC 330. I'll preview that, react to that, and we're oh so close. We're oh so close to fantasy season, to football season. I'm so excited. We're just about there. It's just about that time of year. It's August. Hall of Fame game is going on right now, as I said. So I appreciate everyone being here. If you're here to the end, I love you. Subscribe, follow on the socials. I appreciate you. I'll see you guys on Sunday for the tight ends, baby. Let's go.